Lena thought Kemal was the answer to her quiet life in Germany. But the Turkish businessman who promised her love carried a secret so dark it would destroy everything she trusted. Lena lived in a quiet town in southern Germany, a place where not much ever changed. Her days followed a familiar rhythm. Early mornings at the bakery where she worked, afternoons spent helping her mother with errands, and evenings scrolling through her phone while sipping tea in her small apartment. Though she had friends, she often felt a little lonely, as if her life was stuck in the same loop while others around her moved forward with marriages, families, and adventures abroad. One night, while browsing social media, she received a message from a man named Kemal. He introduced himself as a businessman from Turkey who traveled often for work. His profile showed pictures of him in front of sleek cars, at busy airports, and in stylish suits. Something about his confidence caught her attention. At first, their conversations were light and friendly, but soon they grew longer, stretching late into the night. Kemal told her about his supposed work in real estate and imports, about dinners in Istanbul's best restaurants, and about the loneliness of hotel rooms in foreign cities. He painted himself as a successful man who longed for something real, something beyond business and money. To Lena, it felt like fate. Here was a man who seemed both worldly and attentive, someone who asked about her day and remembered the little details she shared. He told her she was different from anyone he had ever met, and she believed him. When Kemal suggested visiting Germany to finally meet her, Lena's heart raced with excitement. She imagined greeting him at the train station, imagined introducing him to her family, imagined what it would be like to have a partner who wanted to build a future with her. She cleaned her apartment, planned small trips they could take together, and even began practicing a few Turkish phrases to surprise him. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt alive with hope. She was convinced this was the beginning of her own fairy tale. What she didn't realize: Kemal arrived in Germany with the kind of presence that turned heads. He stepped off the train carrying sleek luggage and wearing a tailored jacket that seemed to belong to someone important. To Lena, he looked every bit the successful businessman he claimed to be. He showered her with compliments, gave her perfume in an elegant box, and insisted on paying for expensive dinners during their first days together. Her friends whispered that she was lucky, that she had found a man who clearly knew how to live well. It all seemed to confirm everything he had told her online. But beneath the surface, Kemal carried secrets that Lena could not see. In Turkey, he had built a reputation not for honest work, but for clever manipulation. His so-called businesses were little more than shifting scams, each one leaving behind people who had trusted him and lost money. He was skilled at appearances, the designer clothing, the rented cars, and the ability to tell stories that made him sound powerful. It was a role he had played many times before, moving from one city to another, always chasing new opportunities to exploit. Lena noticed small things but brushed them aside. When she asked about his company, he would answer with vague descriptions, changing details depending on his mood. He claimed to have meetings in different German cities, but never explained what they were for. Instead of business partners, the people who called his phone seemed impatient, their voices sharp and demanding. Whenever she asked too many questions, he would distract her with gifts or affectionate words, convincing her that love mattered more than details. In reality, Kemal had not come to Germany seeking romance. He had come because he saw Lena as an opening, someone kind and trusting who would believe in him without hesitation. For him, her warmth and her modest life were not something to cherish, but something to use. While Lena dreamed of a man who would build a future with her, Kemal was already PL. Life with Kemal quickly shifted from excitement to unease, though Lena didn't recognize the change at first. He moved into her apartment almost naturally, as if it were the most logical step. At first, she enjoyed having him there, waking up to his presence and sharing meals together. But soon, his charm began to fade, replaced by subtle demands that grew heavier with time. He insisted that she didn't need to work anymore, saying it was beneath her to spend long hours in the bakery when he could provide for her. It sounded flattering, but it also meant she would have no income of her own. Kemal became increasingly involved in every aspect of her life. He wanted to know where she was at all times, and he began scrolling through her phone when she left it unattended. He checked her messages, asked who she was speaking to, and grew irritated when she contacted friends without telling him first. Lena told herself that this was simply how a protective partner behaved, that his possessiveness was proof of how much he cared. Yet deep down, a quiet unease was beginning to grow. His control extended to money as well. Kemal persuaded her to give him access to her bank account, explaining that it would make it easier for them to manage their expenses as a couple. He talked about their future together, buying a house, maybe starting a family, and Lena, caught up in the dream, agreed. At first, he used small amounts, claiming they were for groceries or bills, but soon larger withdrawals became frequent. Whenever she asked, he reminded her that everything he did was for them. The once warm atmosphere of her apartment began to change. Where there had been laughter and affection, there was now tension and fear of disappointing him. Lena realized she was no longer making choices for herself. Each day felt like she was walking on fragile glass, careful not to upset the man she once thought would bring her happiness. What had started as a fairy tale love story was quietly turning into. Lena's family began to notice the changes in her life, even if she tried to hide them. When they visited, they saw how Kemal dominated every conversation, speaking over her and giving vague answers whenever questions about his work came up. He claimed to be constantly busy with meetings and investments, but he never shared any real details. Instead, he brushed off their curiosity with a smile and a quick change of topic. What unsettled them most was how withdrawn Lena seemed. She laughed less, avoided eye contact, and rarely made plans without first looking at him for approval. Her parents expressed their concern, but Lena defended him. She repeated his stories as if they were her own, saying he was simply misunderstood and that people judged him because of his success. Still, she couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt inside her. Small inconsistencies in his tales began to stand out. One day, he would say he owned several properties in Istanbul, and the next he spoke about working in international trade with no mention of real estate at all. The more she listened, the less sense it all made. Then came the discovery that shook her. While cleaning their apartment one afternoon, Lena found a stack of unopened letters hidden inside a drawer. The envelopes were covered with Turkish stamps and official-looking seals. Out of curiosity, she opened one, only to find a message filled with urgent demands for money. Though her Turkish was limited, she recognized enough words to understand it was no friendly correspondence. Other letters carried the same tone, warnings, threats, and reminders of debts. Her hands trembled as she placed them back, pretending she had never seen them. That night, she watched Kemal more closely. His late-night phone calls, his sudden mood swings, and his constant need for money all seemed connected to those letters. The image of a confident businessman was crumbling before her eyes, replaced by something much darker. Yet Lena stayed silent, afraid of The pressure from Kemal grew heavier with each passing week. He began speaking about opportunities that could make them wealthy, painting vivid pictures of a future filled with comfort and security. He told Lena that he wanted to invest money in Germany, but that it was difficult for him to do so under his own name as a foreigner. He framed it as a practical problem with an easy solution. She would take loans in her name, and he would handle the rest. He promised it was temporary, just until the profits came in, and then everything would be repaid. At first, Lena resisted. The thought of borrowing large sums frightened her, and she tried to remind him that they already had enough to live on. But Kemal's tone shifted from persuasion to manipulation. He reminded her of the sacrifices he had made to come to Germany for her, insisting that she needed to prove her loyalty in return. He accused her of doubting his love and claimed that without trust, their relationship could never last. Each word wore her down like water against stone, until resistance began to feel impossible. When Lena finally agreed, she told herself it was for love, not money. She signed the documents at the bank with trembling hands, convincing herself that this was a step toward building a life together. Kemal took the money immediately, saying it was the beginning of something big. Yet no investments appeared, no returns came back. Instead, he demanded more, pushing her to take out additional loans, each time promising it was the last. The weight of the debt began to suffocate her. Letters from the bank arrived, warning of repayments due, and sleepless nights became her new normal. Whenever she expressed worry, Kemal turned cold, accusing her of being ungrateful and short-sighted. The warmth that had once surrounded their relationship was gone, replaced by a sharp edge of fear. Lena began to realize that what Kemal wanted was never a shared future. It was access, control, and money that wasn't his. By the time she understood, her own name and finances were already tangled in a web of obligations she could not escape. The turning point came one ordinary evening when Lena's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. On the other end was a German investigator, his tone calm but firm. He explained that Kemal was already under observation by the authorities. He asked careful questions about her involvement, about the loans in her name, and about what she knew of his activities. In that moment, Lena felt her world collapse. The man she had trusted, the man she had defended to her family, was not only dishonest but entangled in a network of fraud that stretched across borders. When the call ended, Lena sat frozen, her hands cold and trembling. She replayed every memory in her mind, every story Kemal had told her, and suddenly the pieces fell into place. The vague explanations, the hidden letters, the endless requests for money. They weren't quirks of a businessman. They were the actions of a criminal. She realized with horror that she was not a partner in his future, but a pawn in his schemes. The debts were in her name, the signatures were hers, and the banks would see her as responsible. Kemal had set everything up perfectly to protect himself while leaving her exposed. That night, she looked at him differently. While he spoke on the phone in the next room, pacing with agitation, she studied the man she thought she loved. The expensive clothes, the confident gestures, the charm, it was all a mask. Beneath it stood a man who had come to Germany not for love, but for the chance to drain her life of everything valuable. She felt sick realizing how easily she had fallen into his trap. Fear and anger mixed inside her. She wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, yet she also feared what he might do if she admitted she knew. The walls of her apartment, once a safe space, now felt like a prison she had unknowingly built around herself. Lena understood she was living with a stranger, and worse, with a man whose plans for her were never about a shared life, but about using her until nothing was left. The fairy tale was over, the nightmare had begun. Kemal's downfall arrived faster than Lena expected. One morning, he told her he had urgent business in another city and packed a suitcase in a hurry. His movements were restless, his eyes darting as though he was constantly checking shadows. Lena noticed how carefully he tucked away envelopes, forged papers, and bundles of cash. She knew then that he was preparing to leave her behind, walking away with everything he had taken. Panic gripped her, but before she could decide what to do, events spiraled beyond her control. Later that day, news broke that police had intercepted Kemal at a train station. Officers had searched his luggage and found stacks of forged documents, multiple fake identities, and stolen credit cards tied to a string of international fraud cases. The polished mask of the successful businessman shattered in an instant, revealing the criminal beneath. His arrest made headlines, and the story of his schemes spread quickly. For Lena, watching the reports felt surreal. The man she had once imagined marrying was now in handcuffs, led away by authorities. Though Kemal was sentenced to prison for his crimes, Lena's relief was mixed with devastation. The financial damage remained. Her name was still attached to debts she had signed under his pressure, and her credit was destroyed. She spent months battling with banks and lawyers, trying to prove how she had been manipulated. Each meeting was a reminder of the trust she had given so freely and the cost of believing in someone who only saw her as a means to an end. Emotionally, the scars cut even deeper. She had to face the reality that her fairy tale was never real, that every promise of love and security had been part of his deception. Yet, slowly, Lena began rebuilding. She returned to her job, surrounded herself with family, and took small steps toward reclaiming her independence. In the end, Kemal had never come to Germany for her heart. He had come for her money, her trust, and her willingness to believe in him. What began as a story of romance had ended as a harsh lesson, that behind polished words and charming appearances can hide the darkest intentions.